You can hear from my voice. As those of you who can hear my voice will hear that I'm not 100%, so, but I've staggered back in order to present my own Mayor's report. But before we get to that item, can I ask you to turn your attention back to item 18 on the agenda? And I'd like to invite staff to come to the table. This was the decision that you made earlier in the meeting to amend the speed limit on Harewood Road, east of Johns Road, to 50 kilometres an hour. And that's extending in an easterly direction to its intersect. Yeah, it was originally to be 60 metres to Woolridge Road, and but you've set it from 50 kilometres an hour from Johns Road, which does go against the advice of both staff and NZTA, but Harewood School sort of kind of sits at that little block there. So what I want to do is to invite our staff member, Steve, is it, to describe to us what the issue is, and then I'll get a sense from the meeting, but it would take a 75% majority to change the resolution. And I'd have to say that from my perspective, and not having been a party to the original debate, it would take a pretty strong case to want to see that speed retained at 60 by a school. So over to you. Sorry?
So in the original report, there were other staff giving advice around council staff position?
Yes, I know. There's been a... I think... can we just allow Steve to present the issue that he has brought to my attention? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, first of all, our apologies. It was a misunderstanding of staff and agreeing with the board recommendations, so apologise for taking up this time. Look, when our recommendation went to the community board for the whole Harewood area 1 to be 60 kilometres an hour, except for that little bit west of the state highway, we had assessed it in accordance with the setting of speed limits rule and with the documentation of NZTA. We are required to take into consideration the views of the community following consultation. So following the board saying, look, and the principal from the school attending the board meeting, look, they wanted it reduced to 50, we reassessed it. And it's still the view of staff that because the school is located in a school crossing point only 200 metres from the state highway, which is 80 kilometres an hour. I know there's a roundabout there and vehicles come. Round that, the school has stated, and when they presented to the board, that vehicles were still speeding through the school speed zone. So the school speed zone drops to 40 at school entry and exit times. We're concerned that being 200 metres, that often when you drop something, and in this case it will be from the present 30 kilometres an hour, you get a reaction that people think that's ridiculous, I'll ignore it. So sometimes when you lower a speed and you don't lower it as much, you get more compliance. The documents NZTA recommend 60 kilometres an hour for this area, and so as we bring that back, it's still the recommendation of the staff that this whole Harewood Area 1 should be 60 kilometres an hour. Yeah.
So, questions? Tim?
So, we've got a hierarchy of pedestrians first, etc. And NZT, as I understand it now, have a requirement with regards to safety. Mm-hmm. So, although, you know, the recommendation is 60 k's, it is a school area. I mean, and knowing from my experience in my community, where we have Wilson's Road travelling south and you turn left onto Centauros Road, cars don't slow down there, and it's actually a real issue for the school. So I can imagine them coming around the corner. So if we make it 50, at least there is an ability, if wanting to enforce it, they can ticket people.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, through you, it's correct, Tim, that setting of speed limits, there is a sense that you have to set something that the road speaks 50. Quite frankly, Harewood's road at that location doesn't actually, it's got intermittent housing and things on the south side, but not on the north. It doesn't speak 60. And a strange example is when we raised the speed on Horswell Road from 50 to 60, we got better compliance of speed. So there are those issues where you set a speed that people are expecting and the road states, by the way it looks, that they will comply with that speed. Again, we just do believe 30-kilometre-hour drop from 80 to 50 is probably asking a bit much in that location, and it would put it, like you said, when they came to us, look, they're not obeying the speed here, it would be, look, you'd have to see the police because it's a arterial road, we're not going to put calming on it. But saying that in the future, as you're aware, there is a proposal that the major cycle route go down that way. That could completely change the nature of that road, and it could be revisited at that time, and it would likely be revisited.
Yep. Sure.
When you said on Horsell Road you raised it from 50 to 60 and you got more compliance, is that because the people that were doing 55 k's or whatever were suddenly under the speed limit?
Yes.
So actually you haven't changed behaviour.
No, it's not that simple, but they were actually doing higher than that. So the 85th percentile speed was higher than 60 and it actually dropped down. So it actually did drop down. So there are weird things like that when setting at speeds that you don't expect. That it has to be something that people expect and the road speaks the speed.
Yeah, Jamie and then Sarah.
And that does make sense, Steve, so I appreciate that. But just to help me get a bit more understanding around this, although NZTA guidelines may deem that the appropriate speed limit for this road is 60 k's, is there any precedence or as a council, do we often differ from that? Like I just think of like even Beeley Ave or Harper Ave.
Through the chair, Jamie, we often differ, and I think the new setting of speeds has made it much easier for council to set speed limits, but there is often a difference of opinion with NZTA.
Sarah, then Yanni.
I was just following on from that briefly. Areas like the Causeway, where we often have a speeding issue, and it's currently at 50, and it makes sense to be 50, but it's long and straight and stuff. But you're going back to the raising the speed limit. I've noticed with the current raised speed limit on Port Hills and Opawa roads, off the end of Brougham, so NZTA have raised it from 50 to 60 recently. People are still getting used to that, and I'm just wondering the time difference. So there are a lot of people who are still travelling at around the 55k mark. They used to travelling at 55, and because they've been doing it forever, that's what they're kind of sitting at currently. It used to be speeding,
yes, and
now it's under the speed limit.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing over time people are gradually raising that up, and they're sort of gradually over time doing the 60, 65. And I'm wondering if the initial assessment on the other one was actually quite soon after the change, and I'm wondering what it would be like a year or two down the track for the compliance.
Through the chair, that's referred to as what they're doing now as the operating speed. I'd be surprised if they went 65, but that would only be, we would have to put tubes out and find out what was happening. But when NZTA changed the setting of speed limits rule to make it easier, they did a lot of work in the background, and in some cases they will recommend raising speeds. In other cases they recommend lowering them. It would be unheard of for us to get 40k speed limits in like was passed this morning in the past, but in some roads like arterial roads, dual lane arterial roads, they may be better to be at 60.
Yanni?
So just want to be clear, because I thought it was quite obvious in the the debate/question that staff said that they'd looked at the community board resolutions, that they were now in support of them, and
Yeah, the staff made a mistake. You just heard Steve say that right at the very beginning. The earlier advice that you received is not the staff advice. That's why Steve's asked to come.
Right.
So if we're going to have a question around who said what said, you received earlier advice. It wasn't the advice of staff.
Right.
Staff have now come to correct it. So we're just going to move on from that,
Right.
and we're going to get to the point where we understand whether we are in agreement to change or whether we want to stay with the resolution that we had.
So can I just trying to understand what the difference in staff advice is? Is it purely based on the
Yep.
safety aspect?
Thank you, Steve. Steve, can you explain?
More than happy. Look, apologise, Yanni.
Because we just had,
When
you were
we-
here for the thing.
Yanni,
we did-
please
we-
don't interrupt.
We did not realise at the time that we believed that it was only for the speaking with NZTA about the times of operation of the school speed zone, not that the board recommendation changed it from 60 to 50.
Okay.
Point number 5 was there. We missed
Yeah.
that
No,
completely.
that's cool.
Yanni.
Okay. So, but just in terms of the advice then, it's purely just focused on the safety of driver behaviour is what's concerning you the most. And you've said that part of it is the design of the road, which encourages a certain speed. If we wanted to reduce it to 50, are we able to put in some calming or change some of the configuration of the road with some things that might
No, it's an
help along with speed?
Madam Chair, it's an arterial road. The nature, as I said previously, the nature of the road may change depending on the design, if the cycle route does go down that way. But at the present time, it is an arterial road. It's taking traffic off that highway, and with it only being built up on one side, when you come into it, I assessed it twice, and I don't believe it says that it's a 50-kilometre-an-hour road. Compare it to your local road you drive and live in, it's not the same environment.
Yeah. So look, I wasn't present for the meeting this morning, so I would abstain. I think it would only be fair that I don't participate in the vote. But does anyone want to move the recommendation that we return to the 60 Ks? Dion, does someone want to second that? David? So, I mean, I'll just put the motion because we need a 75% majority in order to make a change. So,
given that we've heard that the concern is about lowering it might actually increase it or not reduce speed as much, whether there could be like a review period where we actually review what is actually happening in terms of speed once the limit's changed and then review it.
More than happy, Madam Chair.
okay, so what sort of period would you think?
Well, look, we could do it within 6 months.
Yeah, okay, so so approve that the speed limit be set to 60 kilometres per hour with a review to be concluded within 6 months.
And as a matter of process, will that come back to ITI committee or council?
Through the community board.
Through community board to either ITI or council. Okay, I think that sounds sensible.
Yep. So, yeah, okay. Is that enough to cover it off?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I'll put that motion. Yep, Aaron?
So, if we're willing to review it in 6 months, why wouldn't we try the opposite? Go with the 50, and if that's not working and we're getting the problems that have been highlighted...
Maybe you foreshadow the motion then. Yeah, so this aligns to staff advice, but if you want to do that, you can foreshadow the motion.
Madam Chair, if I
Steve?
may, I would suggest it would be better the other way. It's like our 30k in the central city. The operating speed's about 43. Very hard to get it back. And we may have got better compliance if it was 40.
Because the other thing to find out if the 50k helped with the cycling underpasses at the end of the street, would more people be biking on Harewood Road as it is if it was 50k? Currently it's 70 for half of it,
Yeah,
and that's what will be dropping to 60 or 50 depending on today's decision,
yeah.
is the thing there.
I think that the result may have been different this morning if this advice had been available at the time. Andrew and then Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, the community board made their recommendation, which we took this morning. Okay, there's been new advice provided now, but I'm assuming the advice that we've been provided now was provided to the community board or was able to be provided to the community board to give them the same level of comfort. I'm inclined to stay with the original community board recommendation.
Yeah, Sarah?
Just checking. There are still quite a number of vehicle entrances, and while the road itself is long and straight and those kind of things, there's still quite a number of vehicle entrances and exits along this stretch of road. Some of them for premises which have multiple, visitors and those kind of things during the day. And one of the things that we've been told with the NZTA road, Port Hills Road, was that the reason it went up to 60 is that they'd actually distanced themselves from the residential, and they had, they'd widened it, they'd created a completely separate street so that there weren't the vehicle entrances and exits, and otherwise, even though it was straight, they would have kept it to 50. So I'm wondering how that plays in, and while the road is designed for that, we have there's still a lot of vehicle entrances and exits and only a footpath on one side of the road.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Yes.
So I'd be likely to keep down.
Yeah, there is Memorial Ave is 60. So there's having the number
Two
of
lanes there though, and footpaths, and
but having the number of vehicle entrance ways. We're not. If it was, we're talking about 80. Agreed. It wouldn't. That'd be too many. But for 60, it is an urban speed limit.
And Memorial Ave also has the trees as a calming feature and those kind of things that we're told, the vertical elements, and the separation between two lanes of traffic, which this doesn't have.
No.
Mike?
So just one quick question. Sawyers Arms Road, which is obviously the next street up, comes straight off an 80, and that's going to be 50.
Yeah.
So what's the...
Yeah. What, Madam Chair, well picked up. The issue we've got with Sawyers Arms Road, we've got a 50 at one end and a 50 at the other, and this random piece in the middle. So it's what we're trying to do is make it easier for the motorist not to be confused by continual changing of speed. We have to try and set the speed limits so the road's speaking what they say. We had to argue to get that to 50 with NZTA because it was either way. And we're not allowed to use 70 anymore, or we're not recommended to use 70.
It was 70 when we...
Yeah.
It was.
So they're trying to get rid of all 70s,
Right.
Madam Chair.
Is it still 70?
Well, it's been resolved this morning as 50.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
okay.
So, and that was mainly because we tried to tidy up that area,
Yeah.
and now it's 50 between outside Willowbank between those two existing 50k areas.
Yeah.
What about, no, Sawyers Arms Road.
I am talking about
Yeah,
this.
no, Sawyers Arms, where it comes off
Oh, no,
Johns Road.
you're talking about Gardner's Road.
I am. Sawyers Arms is
No,
going to
yeah.
60.
Oh, is that going to 60, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Look, you've got a 50 in the middle of the 60s.
yeah.
Watson's
Aaron?
50 in the middle of 60s.
But on that example from NZTA about coming off the 80k and going into 50, we've resolved that if you go west into Harewood, up at the business park end, that's now 50k an hour. And Orchard Road there, where there are no children, there's no preschools, there's no kindergartens, there's no primary school, and these kids don't cross. And we're going to give them, competent adult drivers, 50k an hour, and on the other side of the road where all the kids are, and two churches, it'll be 60.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's
Off the same road,
It's another
the same
very good
roundabout.
point, and it comes back to that when you set a speed limit, you must have a certain length of road, and that was an anomaly when the NZTA did up the highway, that it was left over, and no one. So that was basically fixing an anomaly. It couldn't be 80. So it had to go 50 because Orchard Road. So the length of that little bit of Harewood Road is not long enough to have a separate speed.
Yeah. Excellent. Sarah?
So Watson's, so if we went with the recommendation, we'd have the 60 on Harewood leading into Watson's and the 60 on Waimairi-Harewood, and then we'd have this short little bit of Watson's in the middle that's 50.
No, Sarah.
that not what-
No, I apologise for
On
that.
there?
I made that apology to the board. That's a CADing error. That Watson's will all be 50. That little bit of red you see there should be
so
at the
you've got
corner.
one 50 kilometre an hour road in the middle of two 60s.
Yes.
Yeah. But if we kept Harewood as 50, then that just keeps that all consistent through there as
Watson's
well.
is very narrow, Madam Chair. Watson's is very narrow. It's totally different environment.
But when we talk about the consistency issues as well, though.
Well, I mean, it's, thank you very much, and look, I really appreciate you doing that, and it's not easy to come down and explain that perhaps some advice that we'd received earlier hadn't been the correct advice for us to consider. Seems to me that, you know, I really heard what you said when you said we might have got better compliance if the central city had been set at 40, and I think you're probably right. So, and sometimes these traffic things are counterintuitive, but I'm not going to participate in the vote because I wasn't here for the full debate. So I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Well, actually, look, put up your hands because it's easier that way. Those in favour, put up your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's lost. So, sorry, you did a good job. Thank you. Eh?
No, it's a majority decision to undo.
But the other way around.
But given that that's now failed, could there be a foreshadowed motion that we do the 50 but with a review in 6
Can we
months?
do a review? Can we do a resolution for a review though, as a new resolution?
Yeah, so, in fairness to Steve and the staff, and since it's gone this way round, and the councillor for the area, more than happy to leave it this way round with the review in 6 months, because if it's not working...
Yeah.
We want to know about it.
Yeah.
So, are you happy to do a review within the 6 months? So if we could just go back to the original resolution that we had.
So I'm happy to move a resolution that brings us
no, we still need under Standing Order 19.5, amend Resolution 5 so that, with the review to be completed within 6 months. All right? So that's all good. Now, who would like to move that? Aaron, you wanted to move that, and seconded by Jamie. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you.